Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Speak Out session on elder abuse. My name is Kerrin Bradfield, my pronouns are she, they, and I'm the Education and Engagement Coordinator here at the Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where we all live and work. I'm in the Yugara Nation, in Yugambeh country, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So October is Sexual Violence Awareness Month here in Queensland, and throughout the month we're promoting the Start by Believing campaign because we believe that when you start from a place of belief, you can really change the journey for people. Throughout the month, we're also holding a whole lot of events, so you can follow along on Facebook and Instagram to see what we're doing. There's trivia, we've got a scavenger hunt, as well as promoting a lot of important messages around Start by Believing and affirmative consent. Today's Speak Out session, as I said, is on elder abuse and specifically on elder sexual abuse. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by Dr. Catherine Barrett. Catherine's the Director of Celebrate Ageing, which includes the Opal Institute. She's an advocate for the sexual rights of older people, and she recently launched the In Her Shoes research and awareness raising project documenting the experience of older women who've reported sexual assault. Throughout this presentation, if you've got any questions for Catherine or myself, you can type them in the comments box. And welcome, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good. Things are starting to ease here in Victoria. So big hello to everyone in Queensland.
So we'll start off today. Would you like to talk a little bit about how you became engaged with the issue of elder sexual abuse?
Yeah, so my interest in addressing this issue came from when my experience working as a nursing manager in a residential aged care home quite a long time ago. And I had a staff member report their concern about a sexual assault to me, and working through that process, reflecting back on that now, that was 20 years ago, it really quite surprised me in how many ways the conversation was shut down. And in fact, the Director of Nursing at the time said this doesn't happen in anyone's ward other than Catherine Barrett's ward. And so I think then, that didn't sit well with me, and I did some work around sexuality. And over time, what has happened is that I feel I have become a lightning rod for older people's stories about sexual assault. So from that early experience of recognising not only does sexual assault of older people happen, but also the conversations are being shut down, I developed a passion for addressing what I saw was an injustice. And when I moved from aged care into academia, one of the things, the projects that I was lucky enough to work on as the chief investigator was Norma's project. And it was Australia's first body of evidence on sexual assault of older people, older women in particular, and a number of other smaller projects. But again, what I noticed was trying to speak out, to present at a conference, to engage community organisations in addressing this as a concern, to engage the peak bodies, to engage government, and to engage in particular organisations and services that I thought had a responsibility. So sexual assault services, family violence services, elder abuse services, aged care services, I feel all have a responsibility to address this issue. But I don't know that any of them are really doing this well, other than Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence. In Victoria, the South East Centre Against Sexual Assault is. Older Women's Network of New South Wales is doing some work. But, and Monash University, the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine as well. But that's 4, in my organisation 5. And I don't see traction. And so with the advocacy work, particularly with Celebrate Ageing, the social enterprise that I set up 5 years ago, I said, well, this is going to be one of my focuses. I'm going to pick up this issue around sexual assault of older women, and I'm not letting it go until people in organisations responsible pick it up and address it. And I didn't expect it would take so long, actually. And the harder or the longer I'm doing this work for, trying to achieve change, the more I realise there is investment in things not changing. This is a very inconvenient and uncomfortable truth for a lot of people. People don't want to know that older people experience sexual assault, so they're not listening, not believing. And so all the way through this, while I'm trying to engage interest, I have family members, and in a small number of cases, older women ringing me and saying, I have been sexually assaulted, or my mother has been sexually assaulted, and this is the response I got. And it's often this very long list of people who didn't listen and who in many cases actively tried to silence an older person or their families from speaking out about sexual assault. So I find this is a topic that I can't let go. And if we could have other people around the country pick it up and address this as a key issue, then I will let go. But until that happens, I won't.
Yeah, thank you. And that permission giving is so important too. You said, it only happens on Catherine's ward, where people are kind of looking as if that's a bad thing. And actually it's when we create space where people aren't silenced and that opportunity, people will come forward, and we need to be ready and prepared to respond to that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's happened is that the frameworks and the interest in elder abuse across the country have ignited have provided a framework for people thinking about sexual abuse. But often the inclusion of sexual abuse is in the definition. So there'll be elder abuse is, and here's physical abuse and financial abuse, and here's sexual abuse. And often the work or the focus doesn't go beyond the definitions. And what we hear very often when people are talking about elder abuse, people will say financial abuse is the most common form of elder abuse. And we don't know that it is. We don't know that. That is not a fact. What is a fact is that financial abuse is the most commonly reported form of elder abuse. And we've got to stop and think why that is the case. And I think one of the reasons may be that it is relative to sexual abuse, it is easier to report financial abuse. It's really clear, black and white. I had $40,000 or a house, now it's gone. It gets reported. But with sexual abuse, we shut older women and their families down. We shut older people down. And you've only got to look at Margarita's story. I mean, so commonly, an older woman or a family member who reports sexual abuse is told, oh, you must have a urinary tract infection. That could not have happened. And, if there's an alleged perpetrator and it's a younger man and the victim is an older woman, the response will often be, oh, he wouldn't do that. He's a friend of ours. He wouldn't do that. And what people are really saying is, I can't believe he would do that. And people will often say, but he wouldn't do that because he's married, or he wouldn't do that because he's married and he's got children and she's an older woman, and why would he sexually assault her? So all that not believing, what that means for frameworks for elder abuse is that we are not seeing data on sexual abuse or sexual assault of older women because we're not listening, we're not believing. And when we are really listening as a country, then we will see, I suspect that rates of sexual abuse will be higher than rates of financial abuse. Because if you think about it, 1 in 4 women experience sexual abuse in their lifetime. And why do we think, and mostly it's intimate partners, why do we think it stops at 65? It doesn't stop at 65. But what actually happens is that we stop listening. And there are a couple of factors that make older women at more risk of sexual assault in their own homes. And we know, I mean, most people know, the general factors for sexual assault. It's mostly, someone women know. It's mostly a intimate partner, that women and girls can be isolated, all those factors. But for older women, there's also the influence of marital rape and unity laws. And for those that don't know about those, that most older women grew up who were in heterosexual relationships. They grew up knowing that their husbands did not have to negotiate consent for sex. And so a husband could rape his wife and it could not be taken to court. It was not considered an offence. And so even though that has changed just a couple of decades ago, older women, most of their lives, sexual consent was not required. And so there is the onus of responsibility is still felt by older women, that they feel it's their fault, they've done something wrong. So that's one of the factors. And the other one is dementia. It's really important to understand that for older women with male partners who have dementia, they may be hypersexual or sexually disinhibited, which might mean that older women, and we have many, many, many stories of older women who are experiencing repeated demands for sex by male partners with dementia. And the other thing that we know about dementia as well too is that older women with dementia are targeted by perpetrators who know that they'll get away with it. And that's whether it's an older woman in her own home, and you might have a home care worker coming in. It was the case in Victoria recently, where a home care worker came in and sexually assaulted an older woman in her own home, or whether it's in residential aged care services. The research is telling us in Australia and overseas that it's women with dementia and those who cannot speak out who are targeted. So our not believing, our not listening, it may be convenient for us, but it is not making the problem go away, and it's creating this myth that this is not something that, this only happens on Catherine Barrett's ward, and it doesn't really happen very much, and so it doesn't need to be a focus. And, we see recently the Human Rights Commission, an incredibly important organisation in Australia, produced an incredibly important resource on elder abuse, and sexual abuse wasn't part of that. Now, we need our peak bodies to step up and have the hard conversations and give older women and their families permission to talk about this, because until that happens, there'll still be that silence, and when we don't have a good enough picture of what's happening and we're not adequately addressing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that invisibility of the issue is really problematic. It's quite serious outcomes from this. We know from the research that many women who experience elder sexual abuse will actually pass away within 12 months of that experience of violence. It's a very severe and impactful crime that we are failing to address. So can you talk a little bit, I guess you touched on there around human rights and some of those intersectional complexities, really looking at generationally, perhaps sexism coming into play, that idea that sexuality is often tied to vibrancy and youth, and so it's easy to dismiss the experiences of older women because they're seen as unsexual. Can you talk a little bit about that link around how the promotion of sexual rights can really help us address this issue?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to recognise that older people are sexual, and we don't. And so one of the things that I did with Sharon Hinchcliffe was we, edited a book on the sexual rights of older people, and we took the World Association of Sexology's Charter of Sexual Rights of Human Beings, and we applied it as a lens to the lives of older people. And one of the reasons for doing that was to really create a sense that older people are sexual, and that sexual assault is not about sexual attraction, it's about power. And we need to understand that as a fundamental so that we can have these conversations. So it felt like a really important framework. But one of the things that we're doing, and Kerrin, you very graciously put the Power Project contact details across the bottom of the page. All the resources that I know of and all the work that's been done in Australia is on the Power Project website. And perhaps two of the most telling resources. One of them is Margarita's story. And Margarita was a Queensland woman. And she was 95 and she rang me and in her beautiful, very dignified English accent said, I have been sexually assaulted and, would you help me document my story? And what we did, actually, I said to her, well, hang on, let's, what supports have you been given? And she said, oh, I didn't know I could get supports. And so we worked through a process of getting her supports, and Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence was a really important resource for Margarita. And about a year after, maybe it was 2 years, I can't remember actually, we finally did document Margarita's story. And there is a film that people can access on the Power Project website on the Margarita page. And I would really encourage everybody to watch that film, because you get a real sense of, this is a woman who is very credible, who's very gracious, who's very dignified, and in her very dignified ways talks about how difficult it was for her to get people to listen. And then when people did eventually listen, how powerful and transformative it was for her, and how her life changed completely because people listened. And then when she eventually went to a residential aged care home, the staff there were so wonderful and she felt safe for the first time. So we can do so much, but there are some other things that Margarita did at 97 years of age. She and I launched a campaign that she led, and Margarita was a former nurse. And we documented Margarita's strategies for listening to older women. And that campaign was called She Too. And it's the most beautiful principles for listening to older women. And when you read them, what Margarita is saying, stop poking fun at older women. Stop not listening to older women just because we're old and you think we're silly. And, very realistic principles. So that's a resource that I'd really encourage people to look at. But the other one as well too was with the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. We decided that what we needed were more stories like Margarita's, so that people would understand, that this is real, that this is real. So what we've done is a call out, and we've said to older women and their families that we would like to document your stories, and not the story of the sexual assault, but the story of the responses when you reported sexual assault. So we've done that, and if you go to the In Her Shoes page, you'll see that we're taking portraits of older women's shoes, and then we're documenting the responses when they reported sexual assault. And I'd encourage you to have a look at, to read Sandra's story, because Sandra's family reported her sexual assault. Sandra reported that she had been raped in a residential aged care home, and at every point afterwards, when her family reported, they came up against a brick wall, and, really quite extraordinary. Well, for me, I find it really difficult to believe. I believe it, but it doesn't sit well with me. And it was the geriatrician who did nothing, the GP who did nothing, the police that said they couldn't investigate because she had dementia, and in her police notes wrote that she had rape fantasies. Because she had reported sexual assault. They kept giving her more and more antipsychotic medications to try and quieten her down, because she was so agitated, and she's saying, he's raping me, he's raping me. So they kept giving her more medications, and she was eventually sent off to the acute sector. And there were 6 people who held her down to take a urinary a specimen of urine to see if she had a urinary tract infection. So all the way along, people are treating, her agitation, but not looking at the possibility that she may have actually been raped. And older women deserve better than that, and we can do better than that. And I think it's so important. With the Older Women's Network, we think this is incredibly important, that we hold a mirror up and say, look what we are doing. We are not only not listening, but we are actively subverting older women. And look at this story. Look at what we are doing. And it's almost, for me, I almost can't believe it. But then I hear the story and I see that it's real, and I think we can do better than that. And we have to.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And it does come back to that believing, like that, scenario you've just recollected. Had someone believed at the beginning Sandra's story, that entire process would have just been much smoother and less harmful to the people involved. And that's, everybody involved in that has suffered throughout that process as well. Listen to you just talking then, I was, thinking it is younger people who need to take up this mantle as well, isn't it? Is that it's kind of occurring when people are older, and that there's less time for them to advocate for the change or the issues they might see around them. And yet it's a fate that will be there for many of us as we age through the system and potentially go into aged care. Can you talk a little bit more, I guess, about what younger people can do and everybody in the community to really get behind this movement and start creating change?
Yeah, well, I think, Kerrin, younger people, we need you, but middle and mature age people, we need you as well too. And older people, at 65, the expertise and wisdom that you have, we need everybody on board. And, your campaign, Kerrin, the Start by Believing, start by believing and listening. And what people are telling me time and time again is that when they listen, invariably conversations open up, and it'll be someone who'll say, often people will say to me if I'm delivering a presentation somewhere, they'll say, I went home and my family said, what are you doing tomorrow? And they said, well, we're interviewing Catherine Barrett, and this is what she's talking about. And people will say, well, that happened to Auntie Joan, and it's like the first time in a family that there has been permission for those conversations. So it's not, in a way, it's not other. This is all of us. This is our families. This is happening in many people's families, or the families of people we know and love. So this is something for everybody. So everybody can know the importance of listening and not dismissing. And everyone can know 1-800-RESPECT. Absolutely. But, go to the Power Project as well too. Watch Margarita's film. If you don't have a fire in your belly, now you will have by the time you finish watching that film. And then, there is a campaign called Walk With Her, where we're inviting people, to take a photograph of their feet and to share them on social media as a way of saying to everybody, I'm here to listen. I'm ready to listen. And I think, older people deserve that. It's their right, but it's also respectful, and they deserve that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Margarita's story is a fantastic film and a fantastic experience that she had. And I would absolutely encourage people as well to go and watch that and really hear the difference it made to Margarita from the very point that somebody believed her, and how it changed her life for the better. Are there any final points you'd like to leave us with today, Catherine, as we kind of approach the end of our Speak Out session today?
Well, I'm not entirely sure who's listening, but I think if you are listening, I say a very big thank you for listening, because I think it takes a lot of guts to go, well, I want to look at this. And I presume that some of you are interested in elder abuse. And I think, with the work that you do, if you open up conversations and you give older people to talk about this, permission to talk about this, then you'll open up conversations. And there is so much that you can do. And, when you watch Margarita's film, when Margarita rang me, and she was ringing from Queensland, I'm in Victoria, I didn't know what supports to link her into. And so I just said to her, look, I'm going to get back to you. And I rang 1-800-RESPECT, and I found out the services she could access, and then I rang her back. Everyone can do that. But I think knowing that, and if you're from the police, or if you're from a human rights organisation, or, if you're from a government organisation, you can make an enormous difference just by the inclusive language you use. Like if you're developing information on elder abuse and you include sexual abuse beyond the definition, you could include a link to Margarita's film and tell people to watch it. Or, if you're watching from Queensland Police, you could say, let's all watch this together. Or you could read Sandra's story, or, those little steps that just open up your mind and open up the possibilities can make the world of difference. And you'll see, as Kerrin said, you'll see that when you watch Margarita's film. You know, she breaks down when she talks about how people transformed her life by listening. It really, like, her life just totally changed because she was about ready to give up. And I think she'd lost about 20 kilos and hadn't slept for a year. And then, you know, her life just changed. So you can make an enormous difference. And thank you for being here and listening. That's a really, really important start.
Yeah, I would second that too, is that it's the small step, getting started, and we've been willing to engage with the issues. So thank you very much, Catherine, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom around the issue of elder sexual abuse. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Well, you know, thank you to the Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence too for the leadership, which has been happening for about 30 years. I think, you know, if we look back at the records, you've been really pushing for recognition of this issue for such a long time. So well done you, and well done to everybody that's listening, and take that next step, read something.
Yeah, fantastic. And everybody check out the Opal Institute, the Power Project, and the rest of Catherine's work, because it's extensive and much needed. Thank you, everyone.